When you look back at the Game Boy, you start to understand that there's actually two different generations of Game Boy, two different eras, sort of like the AD and BC of the Game Boy. You know, there's before Pokemon and after Pokemon. Pokemon changed the Game Boy system because tons and tons of people bought Game Boys to play Pokemon, you know, red and blue, or in Japan, green and red for a while. Then blue and yellow would come out, then yellow would come out here. You know the drill. Well, anyways, Pokemon was like a generation-changing game, right? One of a kind. And the Game Boy was a success prior to Pokemon, but Pokemon blew it up beyond anything. And when you look back at the pre-Pokemon era of Game Boy, there are some lost classics on that system that people have either forgotten about or just don't talk about because Pokemon was so overwhelming. And I would say the two best games on the Game Boy prior to Pokemon, at least two of my favorites, Metroid 2, which was awesome, still awesome to this day, and Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. So when Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening got announced as getting a Switch remake, I was on board. I know a lot of people have debates about what their favorite Zelda game is. Ocarina of Time, Link to the Past, the original, Link's Awakening gets thrown in there sometimes. Majora's Mask is great. I mean, I love 3D Zelda games. I love Majora's Mask, Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker. I actually think Majora's Mask, I might like that a little bit more than Ocarina of Time because the concept is so unique. But I've always preferred the top-down Zelda games. I've always had favoritism towards them because my favorite game, actually, it could be my favorite game on Super Nintendo. I have to really think about it, but one of my top three easily favorite games on Super Nintendo is A Link to the Past. So when Link's Awakening came out, which is supposed to be a direct sequel to A Link to the Past, even though the timeline might be a little shifty on that, back then that's what we thought it was. I was on board, and it really does feel like A Link to the Past. Very similar concepts from Link to the Past were borrowed and taken and put into this game, and now we have the Switch remake. So this is my review for the Switch remake of A Link to the not Link to the Past, Link's Awakening. So again, when this got announced, I was super hyped. Like I said, I love top-down 2D Zelda games. Love Minish Cap, great game. Oracle of Seasons, Oracle of Ages. Link's Awakening has a very unique storyline because it does not take place on Hyrule. It takes place on a mysterious island, and the entire goal that you have in the game is to awaken the Windfish. And when you do that, something will happen. I'm not going to tell you what, but something will happen. And they give you clues throughout the game as to what will happen. And like other Zelda games, the whole thing that makes this game fun is the exploration and the dungeons. Like other Zelda games, you have 8 dungeons to go through to get 8 musical instruments that you need to awaken the Windfish. Now, this is just like how it was in Link's Awakening. There's the original Game Boy version. There's not that many differences. Also, please be aware there was a soft remake called Link's Awakening DX that came out. I never played that version, actually, but it was for the Game Boy Color when they were remaking old games and kind of adding stuff to them a little bit. This is the Switch remake, which actually brings in all that stuff plus more. So anyways, but the cool thing about Link's Awakening that makes it different is that it's not just 8 dungeons. You actually have like sort of like minor dungeons to go through, minor areas that unlock objects to get to these dungeons. You have to get these keys to get into the dungeon. So I always like how they did that here in this game. And what makes this game really unique, and Mr. Gentleman did a great video on this. Go check out Mr. Gentleman on YouTube. He really went into how this Zelda game is different than all its predecessors. Now, obviously, these ideas and concepts were all thought up in Link's Awakening, but the fact that you have, like, different music for every dungeon, I thought that was really creative. The fact that you have a Chain Chomp as an ally at one point in the game, I think is fantastic. The mini games are fun. This game, though, adds something that I don't remember being in the original, and that is the custom dungeon feature. In the game, there's a mini game or a side game or whatever you want to call it, where you can actually create your own dungeon. They give you these little tiles, and you put them down, and you construct your own dungeon and then go through it. And I haven't even really finished this yet because I'm still getting more tiles. And but it looks so much fun just putting everything together and just... If they ever come out with like a Link Legend of Zelda dungeon maker like Mario Maker, I'm on board for that. I am on board for a Legend of Zelda dungeon maker. Old school 2D, pick what the weapons you want, could be a heck of a lot of fun. Really, a lot of the game is a graphical update, even though the gameplay does feel a lot more smooth than it did during the Game Boy era. You have to remember the Game Boy era was like 4 shades of green. Here we have a full, beautiful cutscenes, which the original one had too, but not quite as beautiful as this, in full color. You know, everything looks really nice and clear and crisp, but yet the game still feels old school. Like, one thing that Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening on Switch made me feel is that kind of old school nostalgia for video games of the past. Now everything's all super hyped up. Breath of the Wild's this gigantic, like, expansive, humongous world. This game has a decent sized map, not anywhere close to being as big as Breath of the Wild, but there's no, like, DLC here or any of that stuff. It's just a game. You play it start to finish. You don't have to be on the internet to play this game. You know, play it wherever you want, offline mode, all that stuff. You know, it doesn't require, it's just very old school. It just feels very vintage, and I think that's what we needed for a remake of this game. And I still want them to remake Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages, because they're both really good games. And also port over Minish Cap as well. The 2D Zelda games have always been quality. I mean, I can't even think of one that's not good. Even Zelda 2, for all its problems, and that game can annoy the hell out of you. I have a soft spot for that game, though, but it can annoy the hell out of you. I think that could be remade, even if they wanted to. I just have so much love for this type of Zelda game, this era of Zelda, the sort of chibified, more adorable, cute kind of Zelda game, you know, very simple. You know, Breath of the Wild was a very serious game, you know, a very, very serious story for the most part. This game, I felt like, was just made to be just a fun little romp. It's not even a long game at all. I was able to beat it within a few days, and I would have beat it sooner if it wasn't for other things I had to do in my life. I could have probably beat this game in maybe 3 days, playing just a few hours a day, but I did manage to beat it. It's about 15 hours, maybe 20 hours if you do side quests. Not a very long game, but it is worth the money, I think, especially if you have never played Link's Awakening, or if it's been a long time. I have not touched Link's Awakening, the original, since, like, I want to say 2000 something, when I played one of the ROMs of it, when I downloaded it at one point, just to play the games that I didn't even finish it. I just played it a little bit. This is my first time playing it all the way through in, decades maybe. I don't know. It's been a long time. I don't even remember. But if you've never played Link's Awakening and you like the 2D Zelda games, you have to get this. I mean, you absolutely have to get this. And I hope it's just the beginning of more of these, because I really want more. Some of the things they added for the remake too is that now you can actually mark locations on the map, both in dungeons and in the overworld. So if there's a location that has like a bomb, you know, crack in the wall, and you don't have bombs, just mark it on your map and come back later. That is very useful. Also, there's a little memories thing that was added to the game that lets you, which other games have done this before too, don't get me wrong. So if you forget where you're at, you can look at your memories and kind of pick up where you're at. There are a couple parts in the game where you will get lost if you're not familiar with the game, or you could get lost, because the game doesn't hand feed you everything, but it's definitely a lot easier in the original Link's Awakening because of the fact that they have this option. You know, you can go back and look at what was said. If you miss it in the original one, you got to remember. That's it. You just got to remember. The creativity of the boss battles and the dungeons really sticks out in this version of the game. It's so enhanced. Like, there's little animations before every boss fight. The bosses talk trash to you in this version. It just feels more alive. It makes Koholint Island, the most unalive place in Zelda lore, if you really think about it, feel more alive. And that's the beautiful thing, is you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Even though I appreciate what they're doing with Final Fantasy VII, they're adding a whole bunch of new stuff. It's not always necessary to do that, especially with a game like Link's Awakening, which many people thought when it first came out back on Game Boy was a perfect game. You know, it really is hard to deny that. It's a really, really good game, especially if you like the 2D Zelda, the top-down Zelda. You know, there were some complaints that I was reading online about frame rate issues, and they're definitely there during certain aspects when there's too much stuff on screen, but it doesn't really affect the gameplay. Like, I'm playing it, it doesn't really bother me. I never once was bothered by this. The only thing that kind of bothered me was I kept falling in holes. Like, the game, even if you go even a few millimeters, whatever you want to call it, next to a hole, you fall in. That did annoy me from time to time in this version of the game. But still, it doesn't matter. It's a small complaint. Big exploration. It's just fun to play. It's a fun little game. Don't expect it to be 80 hours. It's a short. If you want a long game, go pick up Dragon Quest XI. You're going to plunk 100 hours into that game and love every second of it. This game, you plunk more like 15, 20, and still, I loved every second of it. So, Link's Awakening on Switch, thumbs up from me. I'm old school as hell, though. Even if you're not old school, at least you know your weapons aren't going to break every 5 seconds in this game, which is very, very nice. And try it. Just try it out because I had a great time. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you very soon.